the text sorted, who communicates during their job? Yeah? Does anybody not communicate for their job? Normally somebody puts their hand up at that point. It's just for a joke. So, yeah, we're going to talk about communication today. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? No? Is that better? Cool. We're going to talk about communication today. And for me, when I think about communication, I think about every time I've been in a sales meeting, and I think about every time somebody's tried to sell something to me, and I've just not been listening because they're not focusing on the things that I'm interested in. I'm having terrible tech problems. So, yeah, if we think about sales meetings, if we think about situations in conferences, situations in meetups, where somebody's having a conversation with us and they're just not gelling, generally that's due to poor communication of some sort. But taking it to our jobs and our daily lives, even if we don't think communication is a huge part of our job, it is. Every time we write a report to give somebody information so they can make a decision, every time we send an email to somebody, every time we have a phone call, every time we have a face-to-face, all these are forms of communication, and they all have a few intrinsic things that are common between them. And that's what we're going to talk about. Once I get my laptop sorted and I can stop vamping. Hey. Don't clap yet, it's not loaded yet. There we go. My full screen is on. Okay. Okay, so the agenda of what we're going to talk about today is, I just want to get us a common definition of what communication is. Because quite often when we do these kinds of things, if we're not all talking about the same thing, then a lot of what comes on doesn't make as much sense. And then I want to kind of ask a question of why do we communicate in the first place? What's the point in it? What are we trying to do when we communicate? And I've got a couple of examples of rules that I like to use when I communicate to make sure that I'm getting the best use of it. And then we're going to go through an example together and see if we can rewrite an email. So before we get started, a little bit about me. I've been writing code since I was 8 years old. I started on a ZX Spectrum. Who's used a ZX Spectrum? One person. Wow. Pretty old. They are pretty old. I was taught to code by my dad, who taught me on the ZX Spectrum, and then I progressed onto Windows PCs. Was paid to write code for about 13, 14 years, been leading technical teams for about the same amount of time, and then I started a business around training technical leadership. So that's enough about it. What is communication? Does somebody want to have a guess? If we were to open a dictionary and go to C for communication, what would we read in that dictionary? Ooh, exchange of information, I like that. Anybody else? Sorry? Expressing yourself. Ooh, I like that one. So that was encoding terminology, sending and receiving. That's good. Anybody else? No? So I really like that last definition. That really fits with what I think about when I think about communication. I think about, we've got this idea, this concept in our head, and we want to move that concept to somebody else's head. That's pretty much what transferring ideas is about. That's what communication is about. So we've got this thought in our own head, and we want to move it into somebody else's. And the way we do that is communication. And that can be verbal, as in my diagram. It can be written. It can be completely audio-visual. It can be body language. It can be any way of transferring this piece of information from one brain to another. But because it's this transfer of information, it has a lot of issues that could happen along the way. If we think about computers, two computers communicating with each other, they tend to use a mode of communication, say an API call, and we all know the issues that can happen if you don't fully understand an API. API is expecting JSON, and we give it XML. The communication is not going to work. The API is expecting SOAP, because it was written in the 90s, and we give it REST. But more tricky things can happen in the communication. There could be language differences, there could be terminology differences, there could be a particular way of expressing something that makes sense to us in our computer system but doesn't make sense in their computer system. And all of these things happen in human-to-human communication as well as computer-to-computer communication. So if we think of an example, a lot of Eastern European languages don't have the E sound. So when we say ship, they get confused between ship and sheep because they can't differentiate between those two sounds. And so our data storage is working, our brain's working, our encoding of information is working. We've taken the idea in our head and successfully translated it into verbal form. But the decoding process isn't fit for our encoding process. The decoding process is fine. It works if they're speaking their own language. But because we're trying to do this communication and our encoding process of this idea of a ship and saying the word ship, when we then get to decode it, that gets lost in translation. And this is just one example of how communication can fail. But that kind of begs a fundamental question. Why do we communicate in the first place? What is the point of communication? Like, fundamentally, if we drill down to it, why do we communicate? Understand? Ooh, to get what we want. Tell me more. What do we want? It depends on the situation, yeah. If you were to categorize the types of things we want, like what types of things would they be?
Well, talking communication is about getting something from someone else.
Mm.
So either agree with us or give us some goods.
So agreement, give us a goods or service. I think fundamentally, I boil this down to three core concepts. Whenever we communicate with somebody, we're wanting to change their thoughts, we're wanting to change their emotions, or we're wanting to change their behaviors. Thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And every time we communicate, that's what we're wanting to elicit from somebody. We're wanting them to think something, we're wanting them to feel something, or we're wanting them to do something. I'm a little bit of a reductionist at heart, and I sometimes have arguments with myself on whether that can just all be boiled down to do. Like, why do you want somebody to think something? Ultimately, you want them to do something. Why do you want somebody to feel something? Ultimately, you want them to do something. So I'm a little bit of a reductionist, but I haven't fully kind of answered that myself. But this, to me, is the fundamental reason why we communicate, is after you've communicated something, you want somebody to feel, think, and do something every single time. If you're having a conversation with somebody about a new technology you're really excited about, you want them to feel excited. You want them to think that it's something that could work for them, and you want them to try it out. And I fundamentally believe that every single time we communicate, we can boil it down to one or more of these things. But more than that, I think we should boil it down to every single one of these three things. Every time we're communicating, we want to elicit some action from somebody. We want to elicit a behavior, a feeling, and a thought. And if we don't start by thinking about the feeling, the behaviors, and the thoughts that we want somebody to do after we've communicated, then we're missing out on the opportunity to impact them. Does anybody know why feel comes first in that list? Yes? Yeah, so for those who didn't hear, that was if somebody feels something, it's more likely to stay with them. That's definitely part of it. It's a big part of it. Anybody else? More primal. Yeah. So 100%. So the feeling, the emotional part of the brain comes before the cognitive thinking part of the process. So if we think about scenarios where in a meeting with somebody and we want to get across the right impression, we've got to think about the way that we're dressing for that meeting. So, you know, if I'm having a meeting with the rest of my team, it doesn't matter what I wear. If I'm having a meeting with somebody who can have a big impact on me, then I think about what I'm going to wear. And why do I do that? Why do I think about what I'm going to wear? Because ultimately, that instinctual feeling that they get the first time they see me feeds through into those other actions. So that emotional reaction comes before cognitive thought. And if we can't get through that emotional filter, then it doesn't matter what we do with the thinking and doing, they're never going to do it because we've not got through that emotional filter, because it's more primal in the brain, it comes first. So my number one rule of communication before I ever sit down and try and communicate with somebody is to go through this process, is to ask myself this question. After they've received this communication, what do I want them to feel, think, and do? So often we go into meetings and we go into the meeting thinking about what we want to say in the meeting. It's really weird when you think about that. How often have you heard somebody say, oh, we need a meeting because I need to say something? What's the point in saying something if it doesn't result in a feeling, a thought, or a behavior? Saying is irrelevant. Feelings, thoughts, and behaviors are what actually change and have impact. And so by starting our thought process, okay, I'm going to do this communication, I'm going to communicate with somebody. Start with feel, think, do. So I blame schools on why this doesn't come naturally. When we were in schools, we were all taught how to tell stories, weren't we? You start at the beginning, you have a middle, and then you have an end. That's how we were all taught to tell stories. I have one piece of evidence that proves that this is completely and utterly wrong. Star Wars. Star Wars starts in the middle. The first ever Star Wars movie, Star Wars Episode 4. This just shows you that you don't need to start at the beginning for a successful story. And I'm not saying that you should always start in the middle, but it just shows that we can break this mold. And if we can break this mold, then I have another suggestion. That's not starting with the start, and it's not starting with the middle. We don't do this. We do this. Get your bottom up front. Start your communication with the end of the communication. So be really, really clear what you want somebody to feel, think, and do at the beginning of the communication. This is really, really important when you're communicating up the hierarchy. Most people in senior management, they don't read your whole email. They don't even, if I'm honest, listen to what you're saying most of the time. They kind of zone out after a couple of minutes. And so if you start your storytelling like this, and you're going through the entire arc of where you want to get to in your email, and what you actually want them to do is at the end of the email, they're never going to get there. They just delete. But by starting it this way, by getting your bottom up front, you can get that impactful thing straight away. So then we've kind of got to ask the fundamental question. If we know that what we're trying to do is influence feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. That's our goal, our rule. How do we get somebody to do something? Kind of a bit of a fundamental question. How do we get somebody to do something? You can't answer. Give them an incentive. Oh, I like that. So what, by giving them incentive, does that mean do this thing and I'll pay you $1,000? Yes. It could be anything. Okay. Provide them with value. I like that. I've honestly done this talk 10 times. It's the first time I've heard that. I love that. That's really, really good. Provide them with value. That's a really good way of thinking about it. Yes. Understand and empathize first. Definitely. And that underlies a lot of what was said before. If you understand and empathize, you can find out the things that they want, the things that will incentivize them, and you can understand how to give value. The way that I kind of rephrase that in my words is it's got to be in their interests. There's got to be something in it for them. There's got to be a reason for them to think, feel, and do the thing that you're trying to encourage them to do. And who's ever bought a drill from Bunnings? Wow, there's a lot of DIYers in the audience. Okay, so, no? No. Have you bought a drill from anywhere else? Never, okay. So, for those who haven't bought a drill, Phil, if you went into Bunnings and you said to the guy at Bunnings, I want a drill. And the guy in Bunnings said, okay, we've got two drills here. We've got the Dual. It's got 50 newton meters of torque and 10,000 RPM. Or you could buy the Makita. That's got 7 newton meters of torque, but it has got 15,000 RPM. Which drill would you buy? One of these is going to work. Okay. You said you're going to heckle me, so now I'm going to heckle you back. If you went into Bunnings and you said, I want to drill, and the guy asked you a question, what are you going to drill? And you said, a brick wall. And the guy said, okay, well, this one will drill a brick wall in 10 seconds, and this one will drill a brick wall in 5 seconds. Which one would you buy? The 5 seconds. So we've kind of got these two different ways of talking about the same thing here. We've got the newton meters of torque and the RPMs, and we've got the number of seconds that it takes to drill a wall. I like to call these two different ways of talking about things, features and benefits. And the things that help people make decisions are benefits, not features. So when we were talking about the newton meters of torque and the RPMs, they don't mean anything. Like, you can't really grasp what they mean unless you're in that area. Whereas when I talk about you can drill a hole in 5 seconds or 10 seconds, it's something that makes sense to you. It's something that's relevant to your world. And this is the difference between features and benefits. So the features of a scenario are, you can think about it like they're the things that stay the same no matter who you're talking to. Whereas the benefits change on who you're talking to. So in Phil's scenario, he was drilling a brick wall. In Robin's scenario, he might be drilling a wood stud. And so the features that I talk to Robin about, the benefits that I tell him about, are going to be different to the ones that I tell Phil about. But the features are the same. Still got 7 newton meters of torque, still got 15,000 RPM, but it drills a brick wall in 5 seconds, drills a wood wall in 3 seconds. The difference between benefits and features. Because we know our areas of knowledge really, really, really well, we intrinsically know the benefits that features get us in our area of expertise. So when I go and buy a new laptop, I'm looking for an Intel i7 with this model number. I'm looking for 32 gig of RAM, not 8 gig of RAM. What am I looking for there, features or benefits? Features. Because I intrinsically understand the benefits those features get me. I understand that 16 gig of RAM allows me to load more virtual machines at the same time. I understand the benefits the feature's getting. If my girlfriend went to buy a laptop and the guy started talking about those kinds of things, my girlfriend's not in tech. She doesn't know intrinsically what those features get her in terms of benefits. And so if the person started talking about gigabytes of RAM, she'd be like, how many pictures does that mean I can store? Right? Fundamentally misunderstanding the features. And so the trap we fall into when we really know our subject matter well is we talk about features as opposed to benefits. And that just doesn't translate to people who aren't in our area. Interestingly, does anybody know what the top speed mode of a Tesla is? Ludicrous mode. They're naming a feature after the benefit. It's ludicrous. I love that one. So one of the ways you can start noticing features instead of benefits is if you're using jargon. Most jargon is termed in the language of features, not the language of benefits. So if we find ourselves using jargon, it's a pretty good indicator we've slipped into the world of features and not the world of benefits. And this is this idea of trying to bring yourself into their world, trying to empathize with them and what matters with them, not the other way around. Okay, who's ready to try an example? Should we try and workshop one together? Yes. Cool. That was a very excitable yes. Okay. Who's received an email like this in their lives? Subject line, timesheets! Capitals, 3 exclamation marks. Body. How many times do I have to chase you guys to get your timesheets in? I'm sick and tired of doing it. 4 exclamation marks. I don't want to keep chasing you like a parent having to scold a naughty child. Seriously, get to it. Who's received an email like this? Yeah.
This week?
Today? What's wrong with this email?
It
It exists.
exists.
Who thinks this email is going to be effective in any way? Who's even going to read this email? Who sees that subject line in their inbox and doesn't just press delete straight away? Because you know exactly what it says. Yeah. This isn't going to be effective in the slightest. So if we go back to our rule 1, our rule 1 was, what do you want the person to feel, think, and do? What do you think the person writing this email wanted the person to feel? Okay. Yeah. What do we think they wanted them to think? Yeah. Here's an interesting one. What do you think they wanted them to do? Have they been actually clear about what they want the person to do? It's a little bit ambiguous. Do what with the timesheets? Yeah. It's actually not even been really explicit about what they want them to do. Like we all kind of know. Like we all kind of know what the thought process behind this is. We all kind of know what they want them to do, but they're not being really clear about it. They don't want to be a parent now. So this person probably shouldn't have kids. Okay, so that's rule number 1, failed on all parts. Rule number 2, benefits, not features. Are there any benefits in there? There's one. They don't get told off. Yeah, that's a bit crap. So this is not an effective email at all. First job. What's the first thing we should do? Take the emotion out of the equation. Go for a walk. Go and have a coffee. Go and have a pint of beer. Do something before we actually send this email and take the emotion out of it. No exclamation marks at all. We've got rid of them. No caps. We've got rid of them. So subject, timesheets. Body, can you all please email me your timesheets by close of business Friday? So, rule number 1, feel, think, do. Feel? No. Think? Not really. Do? Do's pretty clear. No, but if we'll come on to the incentives. We'll come on to rule number 2 in a minute. The do's there. The do's pretty clear. But there's one thing I challenge with this email. Can anybody guess what it is? Thinking back to that ship and sheep scenario, there's one thing that I would change with this email. Yeah. The other thing is this COB. Who knows what COB means? Most people know. If English wasn't your first language, if you're new to Australia, you might not know what COB means. So this is okay. I think definitely we can change the COB. But going back to the point of incentives and value and empathy, we've not hit rule number 2. We've kind of hit rule number 1, feel, think, do. We've not hit rule number 2, benefits, not features. Are there any benefits in there at all? No. Nah. Okay. What benefits could we add into this email? You can get paid. Subject line, making sure you're paid the right amount this month. Who's going to delete this email? Can you all please email me your timesheets by the end of the week? Taking off the COB. Just made it a little bit clearer, solve the ship versus sheep scenario, and then so I can update payroll to reflect what you've earned. Nobody's deleting this email. Everybody is reading it. Everybody is super clear on what they want them to do, and the benefits are there right front and center. Who thinks this email is going to be more effective than that first one? Yeah. So this is how we can take something that was emotionally driven, that was written based on an emotional state that maybe the person shouldn't have written the email in, and turn it into something that's going to be super effective. I have some homework for you. Bet you were expecting that. Here's another one. We're not going to do this one now. In fact, so this is a sales email. This is terrible. This is based on a sales email that I received from an accountant trying to sell me their services. That I laughed when I read it. So the homework for you guys is rewrite this and email it to me. My email address is up there, and I'll give you some feedback on how well you've done on rule number 1 and rule number 2, and I'll let you know. If you want a little bit more help, so I'll just let everybody take a picture of that. That's the hard one. Sorry? I can make it available. If you come see me afterwards, I'll give you it. If you that's the harder version. If you want a little bit of help, I've highlighted some stuff which will help a little bit. So this just gives you some kind of key points of where rule number 1 and rule number 2 are falling down. What? You're all cheating. If you took a picture of the first one, stick with it. Stick with your guns. So I want to point out one thing on this in the room. There's this. So we've got the features and we've got the benefits. I want to point out something which I like to call a pseudo benefit, which is this here. More efficient. Is that a benefit or a feature? Kind of a little bit of both. It's what I call a pseudo benefit. It is really a feature because you don't want the efficiency. You want the thing the efficiency gives you. You don't actually care if something is more efficient. You care what you gain because it's more efficient. And so I'm not going to spoil the homework, but there's some really interesting things that you can do with efficiency if you really drill into the reason why people want efficiency in the first place. If this helps and you're doing the homework, pick a persona, pick somebody that you're sending this email to a boss of 5 people who's just started their own business. Like, just come up with a persona. Just let me know who the persona is. It's my cousin Jerry. Great, thanks. But if the closer you get to knowing who this person you're sending the email to is, the closer you can get those benefits away from the features. Because if you really, really, truly empathize with that person and you understand the things that they want, then you can turn these things which feel like benefits but are not into actual benefits. So for somebody who, just to give you a clue, for somebody who runs their own business, what's more important to them? Time or money? Depends on the person. And so if I say something is cheaper, might not be more effective as if I say something like, it means you can spend your weekends with your kids, not doing your tax return. That might be more impactful for that person. Okay. That's it. Thank you.